Okay, good morning. TGIF, it is Friday, so not really much to cover macro wise. We had the CPI, PPI data, and we had a few rumblings from, I believe, Janet Yellen, who kind of put out there, well, not kind of put out there, she said that she didn't see rates going lower. So if we want to play the inverse on that, we can see rates going lower, meaning she said rates not to see the levels of pre-COVID levels. So we can take her for a word or whatever. But what is this sell-off? I really want to just talk about on-chain data today because there's not really much to discuss on a Friday, at least this Friday. So why is Bitcoin selling off? And we're going to dig into that. So we're going to take a look at the price. If you've been following the channel, you know that this was long overdue. We've needed to pull back. We have needed to get this healthy pullback going to potentially move higher. But we want to see exactly why we're pulling back. And that's what this video is about. So we're going to get into some on-chain data with Glassnode. So you need to have a Glassnode membership to kind of follow along. I have the advanced, so I believe that's like $39 a month, or you could pay annually, which breaks down to $29 a month. So first thing, we want to get to this sell-off, and let's take a look. Let's take a look at the supply and profit. So we're going to look at the supply and profit here. Where are we at? All right, so we got percent of supply and profit. And if you're not familiar with on-chain data, there's a lot of companies that do and track on-chain metrics. Glassnode being one. You have a few others: Into the Block, Token Terminal, Coin Santiment, or Sentiment, DeFi Llama, you name it, depending on what you're looking for. In this case, we're going to be focused on Bitcoin, and Glassnode does a really good job with a lot of Bitcoin metrics. So that's what we're going to take a look at. And first thing we're going to take a look, when you see a sell-off like this, we want to look at the percent of supply that is in profit. Now, this metric is an oscillator that allows us to better understand the current state of the Bitcoin market. It's kind of similar to tracking UTXOs, so unspent transactions output. If you're in My Tech Academy, then you know you went through the Bitcoin 101 course where Eli talks on UTXOs and whatnot. And so here we see a threshold. You know what? Let me get out of dark room mode. So excuse your eyes. Better see here the red and the green. So when we're up here, we're basically in an elevated level of, there are a lot of tokens, the percentage of supply of Bitcoin that is in profit. So one can instantly say, okay, so it looks like, we're hitting a high level here and there is potentially some profit taking. And the on-chain data kind of confirms that, so we see a sell-off, but the sell-off means what? Are people taking profit? If the sell-off was taking place and we were down here, then, or in between, then we could say, oh, wow, there's not a big percent of supply of Bitcoin in profit and they're selling. We tend to see this as we get close to market bottoms. Once we get into this green area here, the percentage of supply that is in profit is drastically decreased. This metric here for the 2018 run, for the 2018 bottom, after the 2018 run, only about 39% was in profit. Bitcoin was at 3,000 then, but we were bottoming out. That was the bottom for the market, and on-chain data kind of confirmed that 39% threshold, and then we proceeded to go higher and then we got up to 10,000. So you see there's an ebb and flow here. So our bottoming for this, we'll just say this current run, was in 22, when Bitcoin was around that 16, 17,000, 15,000 number when it dipped that low. And less than half of the supply of Bitcoin was in profit. So now we've been on the way up. We've since had the ETFs. We've since had a lot of things where people started to accumulate, and now we are in the profit zone. So this is our first metric here, percent of supply in profit. We see there's a lot of Bitcoin in profit as of today. We are looking at what, 99.63% in profit in Bitcoin. So now we're going to unpack this further, and we're going to take a look at balances on exchange. So the key ticker here when you're looking at the balances on exchange, the big picture, I'm going to narrow this down to a 1 hour threshold. And so what I'm going to do here is kind of scale this up to ours here. So we haven't seen a influx of Bitcoin heading onto exchanges. The lower the orange line means the lack of inflows. So this orange line here is going lower. So it's not like people are adding Bitcoin, to the exchanges, and which is why we see this sell-off. So that's good data. That's good data to have. We can scroll back to say 2016, where we got an influx of exchange volume. So we started to get an influx of exchange volume while the price was accelerating. That means there's a lot going on. And then as the price rose, as it caught up, then profits started to take. We had a bit of a hodl phase, just traded sideways. And so now Bitcoin is being taken off the exchanges. We're not seeing a huge inflow of Bitcoin on exchanges. And the price, sold off. So so this is all good data. We're kind of building a story here. We're building a story. So we saw the supply and profit. It was a lot. 99% of the current Bitcoin supply is in profit from hodlers. And now we see a lack of inflow onto exchanges. So now let's take a look at what is called the Bitcoin or the network liveliness, but we're looking at Bitcoin here. And this metric measures how dormant the coins are. It will trend lower when more coins are being hodled, when people are holding, those long-term holders, and it will trend up during the distribution phase. So similar to Wickoff. So you have a distribution phase, and we tend to see this during bull markets. So we had a bit of a hodl phase here. Let's take a look here. So we can look back at 2020. We had a bit of a hodl phase. People were holding, and the price of Bitcoin was somewhat trending up, but trading sideways. And then as people wanted to sell their Bitcoin, we get into the distribution phase. Then the price rises, and we start to see more of that. And this was obviously during the bull run. This was the bull run. This was the bull run. And then we went back to this hodl phase. And now, flash forward to today, we are seeing an uptick in this orange trend line, which means there's some slight distribution going. There's selling. There is selling. So we have been in a bull run. We've been in a bull run currently, and it is expected for people to start taking profits. Now, why they're taking profits, we have to kind of pan out to what I've been covering this past week with all this economic data, potentially risk on assets not being favorable. Who knows, the Fed could be getting through to the markets. But for the purposes of the on-chain data, we're seeing a distribution right now, distribution phase. So we're building our story. We're building our story. So now we're going to look at long-term holders, net profit and loss, and short-term net profit and loss. So let's take a look here. NUPL. Okay, so this is a really simple metric, guys. You essentially, I love how they have it color coded. We can look at it on a daily part. So when we get to our euphoric phase, when we're in like the tops of the markets, this will be blue. As see there, this is like the ultimate. The blue is the greed phase. This is where we're at our tops. This is where a lot of distribution is happening from long-term holders, mind you. So then we'll kind of see a scale back in the green, and then we'll get to those phases where you get capitulation. The red is where you want to be buying per se. When you're down here at these capitulation stages in the markets for us, in 2022 of November, 16K was one of our capitulations, and 20K in 2023 of March. So just over a year ago, we had a bit of a capitulation. So now we see we're getting close to more of a euphoric phase in the market from long-term hodlers. So again, this adds to our narrative of there is profit taking. There is some profit taking from people who have been holding Bitcoin. And we're going to take a quick look at the short-term hodlers. And we see short-term hodlers, they're not really much in the euphoric phase. And this metric is measuring short-term as Bitcoins younger than 155 days. So we're still not quite there in terms of that. If we span out, we slightly get some with some belief phase, but we could say that the yellow for short-term hodlers, because they're short-term, is where we can start to say that's their peak is. We rarely see a euphoric phase for short-term. We could honestly say the green up here would be the equivalent of the euphoric phase historically, but yellow is generally our color, I should say, we should be looking for when it comes to short-term hodlers. So narrowing this down to today, let's see, we do this for a 1 hour. So yeah, we see short-term hodlers, kind of in that profit range. We see them in profit, and we're building on this story. So we're going to continue to build on this story, and we're going to look at our SVAB, Sierra Victor Alpha Bravo, spent volume age bonds to determine how old the Bitcoins that have been selling are. And this will help us determine if these are kind of confirm, are these the long-term hodlers or are these the short-term investors? Are these long-term investors or short-term investors that are doing a lot of the selling that we see here, the sell-off? All right, so let's kind of scale this. Let's remove, I'm going to break this down in segments. We're first going to look at, we're going to look at 6 months to 1 hour. That's what we're going to look at. And we see a lot of activity here. We see a lot of spent volume on the Bitcoin network being done in the 1 hour range. We have 60%, a lot, over 50%, 50, 60, 70s, 80s. So we see a lot of spent volume being done on the Bitcoin network with people who are holding Bitcoin for more than an hour. an hour to 24 hours, one day, an hour to 24 hours. That's been a lot here. Look at that. Over 80% in this category here for the 1 hours. So that's good data. We also have data for the 1 hour, 24 hour, as well as, not as much here for people who are holding Bitcoin for a week to 1 month. So they aren't doing a lot of spending on the network, but it's really between this 1 day and 1 week, the 1 week and 1 month crowd, not so much, but 1 to 24 hours, 1 hour here. So if you know anything about markets, this type of activity already is telling me short-term and traders. So we're seeing trade volume here, but let's confirm this. So we're going to isolate. We're going to isolate here, and we're going to just take a look at the 3 month to 6 month to 1 year. So here we go. We have a few spikes. We have a spike here on March 8th, close to 18% of people who have held Bitcoin for 6 months to 12 months spent, kind of cashed out. And that's good data. Some slight peaks here from people who've held for 1 year, but we're not seeing anything substantial in these categories. But we do have what would be equivalent technically of long-term hodlers spending. And that confirms the metric we saw earlier about percentage of supply and profit, where we did see some long-term hodlers in profit that are potentially taking profit. And that can confirm right here on chain. But the majority of our activity has been in this 1 hour, 1 hour and 24, 1 day, 1 week. That's what we're seeing here. This is what the on-chain data is confirming, and will paint a bigger picture with our TA, our technical analysis, and explaining this sell-off. Is this anything to be worried about? Do I buy the dip? So this is what on-chain does. This is one of the benefits of blockchain and this type of open source data, if you will. This would be equivalent to doing a discounted cash flow valuation on a stock and determining its intrinsic value, and then seeing that intrinsic value on a chart, mapping it out and waiting for it to hit. So, this is the kind of analysis and study that you can do. So let's keep building off this. So we're building our story. We're seeing a lot of activity with the people who are spending, that have been only holding Bitcoin for 1 hour to 24 hours, 1 day, 1 week. So these are intraday traders, swing traders, for the most part. But we did see some Bitcoin holders sell that have been holding for a while. At least 6 months to a year, taking profits. So now we're going to go to our net realized profit and loss metric, net realized profit and loss right here. And, to keep it simple on this chart, the green you see here shows profit. And that supply is going back into circulation. And so when you see this green, that means these are people taking profit. Supply has to come back into circulation. People who are putting their coins back onto the exchange to sell. And there has to be demand. You can't just, you got to have a buyer for a seller. If you don't have enough demand, if you don't have enough network activity, those are traders, if you don't have enough activity and demand, a lot of people trying to sell on the ask, well, the bid's going to go lower because you don't have enough on the bid. You have too many people selling on the ask, and it will send the price lower. And that's what we see here. We see this clearly. This is what, as of yesterday, there was roughly 9 billion US in demand taking profit on the network. There wasn't enough demand for that. And so we are seeing a sell-off. We still see some profit taking here, but you have $9 billion being taken onto exchanges for selling. So this is really good. We see a lot of, we're building our story here. We're seeing what's really going on, supply and demand. Is there enough activity? Short-term hodlers versus long-term hodlers. So now the net realized profit and loss, there was roughly, again, 9.5 billion, we'll just round up, being put onto exchanges. There was 9.5 billion people saying, hey, I got Bitcoin to sell, here you go. There isn't enough demand right now in the network, assuming for that. And there was a lowering of the price. Nobody wants to buy at 73. So, all right, well, do you want to buy at 67? We got to find where we're going to buy at. Where are we going to have people take profits? Or, yeah, find your buyer. Excuse me. So, again, we see a lot of green here. And let me expand this out. So I've expanded this out, and you see here the red. These would be individuals willing to take a loss. So this is more like fear. This is around the 22 sell-off, all of that. This is, people are like, hey, I just want to get out. Boom. But we're not seeing that here. Look at this. All green, a lot of profit taking. There's been a lot of demand. There's been demand, but the demand has increased. The volume has increased. And now we're not seeing as much demand, so we're selling off. All right, so now we're going to go to our spent output and profit ratio to continue building out our story. Our SOPR. Right here. We're going to look at the adjusted, and we'll look at the traditional SOPR. So this adjusted ignores all the outputs I showed you earlier with 1 hour. But the spin output right here, profit ratio, is showing, again, there's a lot of profit taking across all people who have held Bitcoin, whether it's been an hour to 20 years. But we see more activity, again, from the other on-chain metrics. This is more of the 1 hour, 24 hour, the swing traders, the intraday trader crowd. So this is kind of confirming all that right here. And this is good data to know. So now let's get into, since there isn't much demand to take on that much selling, we want to take a look at the active addresses here. So address activity, how's it been? Has it been increasing? We're going to span out here. Has it been increasing? Has it been decreasing? What are we looking at? We can see, looking historically, 2017, we've seen a huge uptick in activity in addresses. And then, during the sell-off, we see that drop. People are less active with their Bitcoin. But then, leading up to another run, we see a climb in activity. So right now, we're seeing really, this is sideways. Slight uptrend, but this is sideways based on historical data. I really narrowed it down to just the beginning of this year. And it's been somewhat of a slight uptick, but it's really been sideways in terms of number of active addresses on the Bitcoin network. So that could go into our narrative of a lot of sell pressure, but lack of demand, So, and then we can take a look at the number of transactions. Number of transactions as well have tapered off. We had a lot of activity here, in late 2023, but the number of transactions on the Bitcoin network have not been as voluminous. So here we go. This is shaping our narrative where, okay, maybe the network activity has peaked as well, which would make sense of a sell-off. So lastly, what we're going to do, we're going to take a look at two more metrics, because we've kind of determined there's a lot of short-term hodlers. We want to take a look into our futures market here. And let's take a look at the futures market. So let us scale this. Let's see what's really going on. Wow, we see a lot of green. So let's take a look at this. This green right here tells us, I'll leave it at this. Yeah, there's a lot of green. So right now in the futures market, this is telling us that there's a lot of people, there are a lot of traders willing to pay a premium to go long on Bitcoin. So if you're not familiar, there are things called short squeezes. This is what these red bars would indicate. But there are also long squeezes where they will lower the price to flush out the leverage in the long positions. And that's what we see here. We see what since, excuse me, since October 2023, people have been willing to pay a premium, and we haven't seen any kind of shakeout for the longs. So the longs are getting shaken out right now based off the futures on-chain data. And that's good to know. This isn't some, huge, massive sell-off. There's a lot of leverage, though. So let's not get this twisted. There's a lot of leverage in the system, and it isn't just like shaking a tree and a few apples fall. This could get shaken a while to leverage out all this, really shaking the tree hard like a Incredible Hulk type shake or something. So that is what we're seeing here on chain. People have been willing to pay a premium to go long with leverage on Bitcoin. And the sell-off indicates, hey, looks like there's not enough there and they're getting shaken out. And so lastly, we're gonna kind of round this off and look at the percentage of long liquidations. Let's see if this is confirming here. And we're seeing that. See right here, we're seeing a lot of longs. 78% of exchanges are long, or 76%, excuse me. So we got a lot of longs that are over leveraged, if you will. And so this is a shakeout. Bitcoin's very volatile. It's not like equities. So when you see these huge drops, this isn't right now time to get onto the Bitcoin to zero narrative. But at least on chain, we're seeing at least this sell-off today, Friday, March 15th, that short-term hodlers are getting shaken out. And a lot of these short-term hodlers are leveraged. So this is the power of on-chain. This is the power of being a part of My Tech Academy, our community. But just wanted to share this with you. This is definitely something not to worry about. Like I told you before, I was expecting this kind of pullback. I would even expect this pullback down to the 60K level. But then we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see if it holds there or we go up. So, and then again, we have to take this into account with other macro narratives during the week that I've been discussing. We had CPI, we had PPI. We could hang out down here until next week after the Fed gives their decision on what they're going to do for interest rates. And we already know they're not going to cut or hike, but their guidance, their tone, the outlook. So that's what the market's going to be looking for. So this is Market Pulse on Chain. Thank you for checking us out. Thank you for being a part of this. Again, My Tech Academy. This is where you learn all this knowledge. Again, you've been listening to this handsome gentleman right here. You also have another one, an Eli, founder, lead instructor. Then you have Chuck as well. So we are three savvy, educated individuals, and we look to always bring knowledge and information to you in our community, but also when we can on the YouTube channel here. So join us, take a look. But this sell-off, Friday sell-off, is more about liquidations, not about fear and, oh my gosh, the sky is burning. So this could be an opportunity for you to get a position and wait. You definitely want to buy on pullbacks. You don't want to buy when it's up here, when it's overextended. So thank you for watching, and have a great Friday and weekend.